And good morning, everybody. Hi, my name is Mike Graham. I'm here live with Tech Talk. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about the church world, installations, how we pick fixtures, how we look at the overall process for installations, and what products we do to go in there. Today I've got Neil Zimmerman here with me today, and as well as Alex Fuller. Neil is the technical director with Christ Fellowship Church up in West Palm Beach, and Alex is the principal partner for Fuller Lights. Neil, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do with Christ Fellowship, please?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Well, good morning, everybody. Very exciting to be here sitting with you all today. As Mike mentioned, I'm the technical director at Christ Fellowship Church. And so I oversee all things signals and systems. And part of that is helping launch new campuses, choosing gear, and I also have the privilege of overseeing our lighting team.
Cool. And Alex, tell us a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, so I started Fuller Lights a few years back, and my heart is like the church, the capital C church, coming alongside partnering with churches to come and help make their production better. And I do a few different things in order to do that. I do a apprenticeship program that I do. It's all virtual with LDs around the country. I've taken quite a few LDs through, which is an 8-week thing, as well as I do my own events called Backstage with Fuller Lights. And we do those events in partnership with Chavez and Forwall, and they are a one-day training event, and those will be coming at you again 2021. And I partner in design and program and do training for different churches and consulting and those types of things, as well as I just took a position as pastor of production at Victory Worship Center in Tucson, Arizona. So I'm doing that as well now too.
Oh, fantastic. So basically, you guys are still pretty busy out there in the world, so that's awesome. So let's go ahead and jump into it. One of the things we've been talking about over this whole month, so it's been kind of an arcing subject matter, is permanent installations and what goes into those installations and how we get from point A of concept all the way to completion. Having Neil here is great because he's somebody who's actually experienced the whole process, and Alex is somebody who kind of oversees that whole process. So, Neil, I know you're in the middle of a job right now. So if you could tell us a little bit how, how you guys are making switches from, because I know you're making a switch right now from tungsten and halogen over into LEDs. Can you tell us a little bit about how that process started for you guys and what's inspired it, and some of the things that you're looking at as far as how to make that switch over?
Sure. So we're on the better part of a 2-year journey now, looking at our venue. Our broadcast venue is about 20 years old, and so it's got 2 big 96 channel dimming systems in it, and basically we've hit a place where we need that power to do other things to support other aspects of production. And so we've been on an adventure for the better part of the last 2 years to take a look at different options for helping us solve that problem. Because it's our broadcast venue, the need for a high quality light source and something that looks really good on camera is a really high value for us. And so that's sort of how our journey started. And we started with, hey, let's, because in order to get to an end, you have to have a goal. And so we started 2 years ago by going, we want to build something that looks really great on camera. And so we need to define what level we want to hit on our platform, what correction we're trying to achieve, what we want people to look like, what shadowing we want, what shadowing we don't want. We have an LED wall that factors into all of those pieces for us. And so being able to help balance, where that is on stage with the amount of light and how it falls into depth of field with our cameras, sort of are all pieces. And like any multifaceted problem, we basically picked at it one piece at a time.
Right.
Over the better part of the last 2 years, and just said, okay, let's start with this piece and this piece and this piece. And looked at different fixtures along the way.
Cool. So, Alex, in a situation like that, where a church is looking to make that change, when you're thinking about, when you're approaching a job like this, how important is like CRI and CQS? How does that factor into trying to choose key lighting and that kind of thing?
Well, I feel like it's one of those things where nobody really knows what CRI is, but everybody wants a higher number.
Right.
And it's like the higher it is, the better it's going to look. And everyone's like, oh, okay. And that sometimes that means it costs more, and sometimes it means it doesn't cost as much,
Right.
And so I'm right with Neil though we actually just did an upgrade in the church I'm at in Tucson. We went from I should say this. We went from 50 Lecos. We took 50 Lecos down and replaced them with 4 LED wash lights. They're actually the new Chauvet R2X VWs.
Sweet.
And so we put 14 of those up, and it replaced 50 Lecos. And it looks tremendously better and way more horsepower and control than all the Lecos had. And super pleased with it. Now, we ended up going with them because they're a great cost-effective option for us. I really wanted to have like an LED sourced, big profile fixture with shutters that I could be able to, really dial my key light in for worship and stuff. But it was just, they just weren't in the budget. And so the R2X VW was a great option for us, because we had looked around at some other lines, but just the bang for the buck, and it is crazy. We're running our front light at like 20%, and it's like, and there's so much more room to go. And so so we're really happy with them so far, and they've
Right.
just been amazing.
So, and I'm going to throw this to both of you guys. When we're thinking about fixtures and putting fixtures in, I mean, obviously, conventional wisdom is very static friendly. But like Alex just said, making some decisions where you can actually drop your fixture count down and use movers instead. Neil, is that something that you think about as you're laying out your space? And Alex, is that something that you would do typically on an install package to offer two options to people? And I'll start with Neil on that one.
Sure. So right now I have 10 venues, and in about half of those the fixtures move and half they don't. And I
Mhm.
think largely for us, we ask the question, hey, how big is the room, and how big is the stage, and how big is the subject we're trying to light, and what is the distance from the hang point at the end
Mhm.
of the day? And so I think for us, I have stages that are 20 feet across, and I also have stages that are 90 feet across. And so for me, you know, I think it depends. The first question that we have to ask is there a need for that level of flexibility in the room? I mean,
Right.
we opened a building earlier this year where the front light doesn't move, and it would never need to. And so, I was able to kind of save some money there and go, hey, we've got a really great static LED front light fixture, that we love, but it didn't need to move. Now, I do have locations where, we definitely would look at the cost trade off of a moving fixture versus a static fixture.
Mhm.
Because especially on my bigger platforms, you know, it's it's the question of, do I want to hang? I think in a similar way to Alex mentioned, do I want to hang 80 Licos, or do I want to hang 10 moving fixtures that help support whatever I'm ever going to need to do on that
Right.
platform?
Right. And then Alex, for you, I mean, kind of the same question. It's like when you're looking at spaces, are you making a conscious decision at the start to say, okay, well, I think I can go more mover on this and cut my fixture count down, or is that a big consideration for you?
Yeah, I think the question that comes before that is, are we going to put lamped fixtures up? And I'm kind of over lamps at this point. Like unless I'm doing like a huge arena and I need like some super big horsepower, otherwise if it's for a permanent install, like I will not put a lamp fixture or spec a lamp fixture anywhere. Like it's just not worth it, especially nowadays where most venues don't have catwalks anymore, and so you're not accessing fixtures very easily. And so I think that's the part for me is like if I need versatility, I recommend doing a lower count because you might be in the same ballpark price wise. You might have less fixtures, but they all move around and they can do more stuff versus having some static fixtures. Because what's going to happen every single time is pastor or someone's going to walk over to that edge and they're going to go just a little bit further than you shuttered that cut in, and you're like, great, now they're in the dark, and with the mover you're like, okay, we're golden, or zoom it out just a little bit. But every single time, or they're like, hey, we're doing a panel this week. We just found out. And, it's Sunday morning. They're like, hey, do you think we can grab a table? We're going to do this. And they're like, great. I don't have time to get the lift out and go up there and change my focus. And so um, I only spec like what Neil said. I will spec Lecos if they're the right project and it's going to light the full stage and that's what they want is just a really nice stage wash. And usually that's when it's a smaller stage, honestly. Once you get into larger stages, it's just not, doesn't make any sense. You're just going to be chasing your tail, moving Lecos around and trying to get coverage. And so yeah, I try and tell them, hey, you know what, do you, and then do you have a lift? No, we don't have a lift. Okay, do you have a catwalk? No, you don't have a catwalk. Are you going to be able to want to move your lights around and shoot them in other spots and not have to get all that stuff out? Yeah. Okay, well, you just answered your own question.
So looking at all that and thinking about how that goes, one of the things we were talking about earlier before we hopped on is like front and side backlight and those kinds of things, as well as budgeting. So when we're thinking about that stuff, like how do you work with customers that have to choose they have to choose how we're going to do the process because they don't have all their funding up front and have to budget through. I mean, is there a phasing that you guys do, or or how do you handle that? And I'll start that off with Alex, and we'll have Neil follow up.
Yeah, well, I think the first thing I kind of ask is, you want to, or at least I always tell them is, you want to keep the main thing the main thing. And so, regardless of the project, regardless of scope, regardless of everything, usually when you come into a project, they're talking about all the moving lights that are going to be on stage, all the flash and trash, all the stuff that's going to happen, and video walls and all these great, cool things. And I'm like, those are all great, and I want all those things, but we need to talk about front light. We
Right.
need to like, if the pastor can't be seen and heard, why are we here doing any of this? And so I'm always trying to let's make sure the front light is great and let's start there. And then once we've done proper front lighting, and then let's add some backlight, making sure that, the preaching is going to look great. Then after that, then we can talk about stuff. The church I'm at currently, I came in and the first thing I did is I put they had this big video wall they were about ready to pull the trigger on. And I'm like, whoa, 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 let's wait on that. We need to add some front light. We need to add some backlight. We need to, let's get some infrastructure things down before we just go ahead and throw a video wall in. Because so many churches I've been to, and they're like, we want a video wall. And I'm like, great. Do you have a media server? No. Okay. Do you have a guy that can make you custom content every week? No. Okay. Well, there's some other things that we need to talk about, because you can have the coolest, awesome video wall in the world, but if you don't have the right stuff to put on it, it's just a big, expensive flashlight.
Right. So Neil, how about you? Because I know you've got, like you said, you've got 10 different campuses, and I'm sure, or 10 different venues. So I'm sure that each one of those venues has different budget considerations. So when you're looking at new stuff, how do you spread that? How do you spread that budget out?
Yeah, sure. Alex, I'd love that you were able to kind of help your church walk through that, because that's such a common thing. Will people reach out to us and be like, "Hey, we bought this LED wall and stuff just doesn't quite seem to be what we thought it would be."
Yeah.
That's an all too common thing in our world, and I love that you were able to kind of help with that. Michael, to answer your question, I've always equated this to baking a cake, right? And so to bake a cake, you need flour and sugar and eggs and all of those things in order to have a great foundation for your cake, right? Because cake tastes good without frosting and without sprinkles. It tastes better with frosting and sprinkles. But if you skip the cup of sugar in the cake and then try to put frosting and sprinkles on it, you're not going to have a very good cake, regardless of how much frosting you put on the top. And so, I think, asking those really good foundational questions are key, right? What does the room need? In church world, our biggest and most important thing at the end of the day is, hey, are we communicating our primary message? Are we communicating the gospel? And so to do that, you have to be able to see who's on stage. In a broadcast venue, my goal, and I always tell my team with our pastor on stage, I want him to look irresistible. I want people to not be able to look away from him and how he's communicating, so that they're paying attention and that they're engaged. And that's our primary goal. And everything else is secondary to that. So,
right.
Hey, how does the front light look? We in our main venue, we still have incandescent fixtures, but before we spent any money on upgrading anything, we made sure that what we had with those fixtures was fantastic, and it looked great on camera, and the angles were right, and all of those pieces. Before we spent a dime on an LED wall, before we spent a dime on an upgrade package, we bought backlight.
Right.
Because we were really happy with the way our front light and our color correction had turned out, but he as a communicator just wasn't quite popping. So we bought great static LED backlight, that we can shift from warm to cold depending on how the stage is lit and how the backdrop is. And we also bought some footlight, and it's a cheap LED fixture. It's actually an architectural fixture from 100 years ago that we got used, But those two pieces created more value for us on camera and in room to create an endearing image that's engaging that people can watch. That went further than the LED wall, than the mover upgrade we did about a year ago. Any of those pieces, that little bit of money we spent on those small foundational items went further than any of the rest.
So, kind of going along those same lines, because you guys keep on mentioning cameras. I know that that IMAG is important. I know that lighting for broadcast, especially in this time, is incredibly important. So this is a two-parter. So first off, I want to talk about, because we've been talking a lot about video wall integration. So let's talk about projection versus video wall. I know that there are some places that are still using projectors and some places are using video wall. Is that mainly a budgeting concern, or is it a stylistic choice? Alex, let you go ahead and field that one.
Yeah, we're currently using projectors right now, and I think most people graduate up to like laser projectors, so you know they look a little bit better. But yeah, I mean, everybody'd rather have a video wall. Like, I don't know anybody who's like, man, I just love my projectors so much. They're so awesome. I'm a diehard projectionist, you know, or whatnot. And I'm like, no, nobody wants that. Everybody wants a video wall. And I think one thing people don't realize about video walls is you know, all video walls are not the same. Like, let's first say that, like, they're not all made the same. And talking about pixel pitch, you know, going from like a, you know, like a 10 mil or 15 mil to like a 3 mil. And that's like, if you don't know, that's the distance in between the actual pixels. That's 3 millimeters or 15 millimeters. And video walls, it really has to do a lot with, like, you know, how close the audience is to the wall, depending on how good it's going to look and how far your pastor is from the video wall to not get them more right. So there's all this stuff, but I think the only reason people don't have video walls is budget. I mean, if you go to any church in America and say, hey, would you like a video wall? Everyone's gonna say, yeah, I do. You know, like, nobody's gonna say no.
So Neil, for you, I'm sure this is something that you guys deal with as well. Being multi-campus, so multi-venue. I'm sure you've got probably have video wall in some and projection in others. Is it a goal to go one direction, or?
So not necessarily. I think, you know, for us, I think like many other things, it often depends on the size of the room.
Right.
So, and just to give some context, my organization, none of our rooms are the same. We have no two buildings that are identical. We have church in an old Target store. We have a village store. We have some smaller buildings. We have a strip mall location. So each of our locations kind of has its own characteristics that make it great, and in some cases make it challenging. So
Right.
we have, you know, of our 10 venues that we support, we have LED walls at 3 and projection at the rest. And I would say we probably have 2 additional venues that we would love to see LED go in at some point, and we've rented LED in just to see what it feels like in space. But largely, in some of my smaller venues, laser projection is such a win for us. It's clean, it's bright, and it's wonderful, and it's low maintenance. You know, and so I think for us, it depends on what's most engaging in that space. And the reality is, in a really tiny little room, trying to get an LED wall to feel like it fits from a brightness standpoint and from a, you know, quite frankly, a maintenance standpoint in a smaller venue, that's not automatically the win for us.
Right. No, absolutely. So now kind of moving on to the second part of this, because I mean, we are dealing with IMAG a lot of times, and IMAG, and so yeah, IMAG lighting might be different from broadcast lighting, and in today's world, how are you handling that in your venues? How do you handle that balance? Neil, so we'll fire that to you first.
Sure. So we have one primary broadcast location, but we have cameras at 5 of our locations. So we essentially treat 5 of our locations like they are broadcast venues from a lighting standpoint specifically. All of them do IMAG. One campus specifically is doing all of the actual broadcast stuff. And quite frankly, this has been a learning curve for me over the last, probably 4 years. It's a tension to manage because, I have 2,200 people in the room, and I also have, a couple thousand people joining me online, and I have to balance this tension of making the experience great for both.
Right.
We have an older camera package at our broadcast location that we're working on upgrading, but right now we're supporting something that's, about 8 years old. And so, we've had to play with, from a level standpoint and from a correction standpoint. Hey, it'd be great to be 5,600 at a certain level, but then the experience in the room really kind of suffers, and that experience in the room is still a really high priority for us. So for us, I think it's balancing that tension of, okay, where do we land so that the feels engaging in room and also looks great on camera. And we've kind of broken some conventional rules to do that because we found that it's worked for us. So we color correct to about 4,000 Kelvin in our space because that we kind of aired on the cold side and aired on the warm side, and worked with our video team and worked with leadership to kind of go, hey, basically we found 4,000 was a great compromise for us in our venue. I'm not saying go do that, but I'm saying that's where we landed based on what we did and what we found worked for what we were trying to achieve. So, working through those details and, riding that tension of, hey, we probably need to add a little more light here so that the people, if we're doing a really dark special, hey, maybe we need to add a little more light here so that the people online can really engage, but let's not blow it out so that it's not intimate in the room. And we've had to teach our guys in the season, like we have a vector scope at front of house and a waveform monitor, and we've had to teach them, hey guys, like this is the kind of stuff, this is the kind of stuff you have to pay attention to in order to make things look good on camera, and this is what it looks like when colors are in clip, and all of those pieces. And they've done a fantastic job learning and equipping those new things to make the online experience look even better. But I think at the end of the day, you're picking at attention, and it's hey, where's the best middle ground to support both audiences?
Right. So, Alex, I'm going to throw this at you as well. Trying to compromise, the live environment versus on camera. And we just had a question from the audience asking us, how do we deal with haze? How does haze affect the live environment versus what you see on camera? And are those things that you take into account when you're trying to light in the house and for camera and for broadcast? Where do those compromises occur?
Yeah. Well, obviously more haze, more praise, obviously. But I'd say I agree with Neil. Like 4K is kind of my sweet spot too, when people talk about like color temperature in the house versus the stream. And I would say, go do it. Neil said not to, but I'm like, go do it. It'll probably change your world and make it look great. Talk to your pastor before you do that, though. Don't just have him walk in and be like, what the heck? My tan went away. No, we changed the color temperature, But I think haze. I mean, I love haze. Don't get me wrong. I'm a huge fan of haze. And I'm like, if you don't have haze, don't buy moving lights. Kind of is there's no point really. And, but now I do love killing the haze, probably the last song, as soon as the last song starts, so I can try and clear out the room before the preaching comes up. And so there's not a ton of haze in the room.
Mm-hmm.
Unless I'm in like a giant venue, like a stadium or something, then run the haze all day and never turn it off. But usually at church, it doesn't want to look like, you walking into like a vape lounge when your pastor's on stage. So
Right.
I try to make sure that the haze gets cut, and we're running MDGs, which are great, but we usually run them heavy in between services and then cut them. And there's enough in the room to hang around for worship. And then once the preaching kind of stops. They're starting to dissipate at that point. And it works great. But you can, if you have a ton of haze in your room and your stream looks a little blurry or your cameras don't look super sharp, it might be because you have too much haze in the room. So I would just, especially if you're running projectors, if you're running projector IMAG and you're looking at your projectors, you're like, why is it so, like, it's not crisp? It might be because you got too much haze. If you can see the house lights, beams of your house lights, that's usually a good sign there's too much haze in the room. So
one more question from out in the world. Are you guys getting any pushback of using haze in our present environment of the COVIDs?
no, I just put a mask on the hazer and then we're good. Like, it runs through a mask. I'm just kidding. No, sorry, you can edit that out later. No, I mean, there's so many other things going on. I haven't had any complaints about the haze and COVID. Like,
okay,
I actually had somebody tell me that the haze somehow helps prevent COVID one time, and I'm like, I don't know about that either. But like, you know, you're always gonna have haters. You're always gonna have people that love it, and it just
right.
is what it is.
All right, so switching gears up a little bit.
All you're picturing right now, Mike, is a hazer with the mask on it.
Yeah, right now all I can see in my head is literally, I may have to do this later and just take a picture of it. So switching gears up a little bit, I know that we all use a ton of wireless in our facilities just because of microphones and that kind of stuff. How often do you guys have issues with weird hums and feedbacks, and how do you guys deal with that, especially if you are going to be using any kind of wireless lighting products inside your facilities? How do you kind of wring those things out so you don't have any or as little problem as possible? I'll throw it to you because I know that you got tons of channels of wireless in your facilities.
Yeah, we do. We, in lighting world, our philosophy is largely, if it doesn't have to be wireless, don't make it wireless. And there are times where the best option is to put out a wireless transmitter and receiver. Hey, we're doing a special in the middle of the room, or hey, this piece needs to move across the stage, or gosh, we need to put something over there real quick, and that kind of a thing. We do, we've got a wireless package we use. We have so much other RF for, audio and all kinds of other things we're doing in our room that we, quite frankly, I do my very best to stay out of their way. But our audio guys do a great job of, scanning on a regular basis and making sure that, hey, there's, we're not overlapping and there's no interference in the right places. And, it's tough, but we try our very best to, when we're redesigning a set, we try really hard not to put a moving light right next to the pickup for the bass player, because we know that's going to potentially induce some noise there. And so I think, the way we solve a lot of those issues is just by sitting down and having conversations with the team and going, okay, hey, this is the drawing. This is what we're going to try to do. What issues do you see? And do these things fit? And is this going to cause a problem? And largely we avoid those things. But when it comes up, we just kind of put our heads together and go, hey, what can we do to help make this better? And largely that's how we solve those issues.
Right. Actually, Alex, I got one more question from out in the world. It's actually from our friends up north. They're asking, how do you set up an FOH light set into a church where you don't have access to the ceiling in the front of the stage because it's too high, or it's just not possible to attach? I mean, is this something where you would try to hang truss, or how would you normally deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, depending on how far it may be the back wall, if it's too high and you can't get up there, how far is the back wall? Angle wise, you kind of want to be at, like, if you're on the stage and you have your fixture here and it's shooting down, you want to be in that 45 ballpark. That's like ideal. I don't know if I've ever been into a venue that's actually at 45 degrees, but that's kind of the goal. I would say, get creative. If it's a permanent install, I'm a fan of just doing, and especially if it's front light or key light or whatever, like I'm fine with doing like a pipe. If it's low trim, I usually like to do pipes because you get an extra foot. But if it's big, tall, I mean, that's such a loaded question. I mean, you got to get up there, talk to an architect, look up in your ceiling where you can rig stuff. And I say, don't try to like, if you're not sure, don't do it. Like, it's worth getting an architect. Sure, you're going to pay a little bit of money to do that and make sure it's like hire a professional company to come in and install your hang points.
Mm-hmm.
And it's worth it. Like, can you imagine if something actually fell and hit somebody during church? Like, I wouldn't want to be responsible for that.
No.
So go find your local production company that knows how to do that. Get somebody in there, get an architect to sign off on the plans. Like, yeah, it's going to cost money, but it's so worth it in the end for the peace of mind to make sure that it's safe.
Right. I mean, just throwing this out there. Last week, on one of the Facebook groups, I saw somebody asking for advice on how to hang fixtures front of house, which makes me nervous. That in of itself tells me if you're looking at Facebook for rigging advice, you're in a bad spot. What scares me more is when I see some of the responses from people out in the world saying, well, you just do this, or all you got to do is that. Well, I've never seen your venue. I don't know your challenges. I have no idea what you're doing, but you should do this.
Right.
And the thing is, you guys, everybody needs to remember that that if something does fall from your rig, it is impossible to say as liability, well, somebody on Facebook told me I could do this. It is important, and I think this is a good segue to talk about integrators and why using integrators is super important. And at what stage of a job should you be getting an integrator involved? Because integrators are there to help you to stop you from making bad decisions. So Alex, because I know that this is kind of your specialty. At what stage do you like to be called? And then as a secondary question, what stage do you typically get called?
Yeah, my answer to the first question is sooner than when they call me. Please call me sooner. And usually I get called either once stuff's been installed, no offense, by an integrator that, maybe just it was a big, they were in a hurry and they, spec'd it real quick and they threw it up and they got in and they got out and they're not really happy with what they got. And so I'll get calls to like come in and like, okay, well, let's make some changes and tweak some stuff. Or I get called when they realize that they've done everything else. They spec the audio, they spec the video lights, and their lighting budget just got cut. And they're like, hey, now what should we do? And I'm like, oh, man. And so you're like coming up with a game plan to, get the most bang for their buck and get, what they need done. But, integrators, I think definitely have a role to play in church, especially I think either in church upgrades. It's more, I think more so when you build a building from scratch. I think that is all the things that the old saying is you don't know what you don't know. Like there's so many things that you don't have a clue about that aren't even on your radar that they're going to make sure that get done. And, to meet code and meet all the stuff. And really, it just puts the responsibility and the liability, honestly, on them. Unfortunately, in today's world, we have to make decisions based on who gets the liability. Yeah, I mean, and there's so many great integration companies out there. There are some not great integration companies out there. So I would say do your homework, talk to local churches in your area that have had integrators come in and ask them about their experience. Ask them, do you feel like you got what you asked for? You got what you paid for? Do you feel like, all of those things? And, an integration company, because you're going to spend, anywhere from, $250,000 to $1 million+ on a big integration. If you're doing AVL and everything, then it could be multiple millions of dollars. And so, interview them, talk to them, make them fly out, make them wine and dine you, make them, say, hey, can you guys come out and give us a chat? Tell us what do you guys offer? And, you know, the better companies will do that. Like they'll say, hey, yeah, I'll come out. Let me talk you through. This is kind of what I'm thinking, blah, 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 blah. And, you know, and as my dad always says, you get what you pay for.
Right, right. So Neil, I know you've been through a few different jobs. So, tell us about, how important do you think it is to work with, whether it's design architect or integrators and other industry professionals to kind of help you through the process?
Sure. So I think, while it's fresh in our minds, I just want to piggyback off of something Alex said. And, he was saying, hey, ask around when you hire an integrator. You have no business talking to a company, a person, or an organization that you know nothing about. Just don't do it. Ask around, ask other churches, ask people you trust. If you can't find somebody, start making phone calls. You really want to know that who you're talking to has a great track record. You want that word of mouth confirmation of, yeah, these people are awesome. Because at the end of the day, what you don't want, and many years ago now, I've lived through this, what you don't want is to have a great salesman who tells you everything's going to be great and is awesome and you think you trust, and then, the project goes in and it's a mess. I've lived through that, and I learned that lesson, thankfully, quite a while ago now. But that pain file is there for me. And so I can tell you, you need to do your homework. That's going to save you so much time and headache and save your organization money.
Right.
As far as your question goes, having an integrator involved in a project delivers you a couple of things. Having an integrator do a project typically builds you a fantastic foundation. That's fun to say. For the project that is, labeled and documented, and you can troubleshoot later on, right? So we do installs ourselves, and we do installs with integrators. It just depends on the project and the budget that's available and how much time our team has. And I can tell you, the projects, inevitably, no matter how hard we try, our team gets pulled away to do other stuff. And so once something is in, it's really hard to go back and make documentation you don't have and do all those things. It takes time, and it takes, lots of effort to try to keep focus on those things. It can be done, but when you hire an integrator that knows what they're doing, they hand you a set of drawings at the end. And so when I have a campus that's an hour away, call me and go, hey, something weird's going on. I go, hey, give me a minute, let me pull your drawing set. And that for me is huge, because when I get a phone call on a Sunday morning from a campus that's an hour away, I can't get in my car and get to them in enough time. I have to be able to have the documentation and be able to troubleshoot something with them remotely. So in my world, that's gold, having that foundation. The other piece,
right,
I think that's super valuable for us when working with an integrator is perspective, right? So, I have experience, and there are guys on my team that have experience, and, we have a great team, and I'm very thankful for all of them. But at the end of the day, we only have so much collective experience. And so by bringing somebody else into the conversation, what we're getting is not only their experience on top of our experience, but the experience of their team and their company. And they're going to know what works and what doesn't. We, as part of our project we're doing right now, I have a drywall ceiling, and we're looking to, hang some movers for front light and do some other stuff. And I have no idea how to get it done, but they were able to, send a team out with, a whole bunch of riggers and look at like, okay, we could fly a piece of truss here and create a substructure. And I don't have that club in my bag. I just don't. So being able to rely on somebody that knows what they're doing, that has the experience, that can give you that perspective of, hey, this is how we go about doing this, or sometimes they look at you and go, hey, that's a bad idea. Don't do that. And I think that's hugely valuable.
Well, thank you for not just drilling holes into the ceiling, dropping some mollies in, and just hanging that fixture off. That's just so you know, that's a terrible idea, and I don't recommend it.
Can I add something to Neil real quick?
Sure.
A couple times, and actually it seems like more than late, I've been getting calls as to come in as a consultant for the church and be kind of that middleman between the integrator and the church to like, hey, church, what are you guys looking for? And then partnering, because I have different partnerships with different integrators, and being able to come in and say, hey, this is the project, and manage the project for the church, and being able to do that, be that middleman. And so if you can find someone like that, if you don't have the experience or the depth of knowledge on your team, because you're kind of just like, hey, I need this, and the integrator's like, here you go, and you get this giant document with all these line item things, and you're like, I don't even know what they are, but they tell me it's gonna look cool. It's gonna look like Hillsong when we're done, or whatever, whatever they say. If you have someone that you can bring in to kind of help you do that, I think that's a great idea.
The other thing on the client side, Alex, I just mentioned you want it to look like this or look like that. It's cool to have expectations. It's cool to have some great ideas in your head, and it's always helpful when you meet with a design team. Instead of it can't be like trying to choose where you're going for dinner. I don't know. You have to walk into a meeting with a pretty clear vision of what you're looking for. And if you say, hey, I want it to look like, I want this to look like this space or this show or this concert, that's fine, especially if you've got some images or something like that, and say, I like this look or I like that look. That is extraordinarily helpful to designers because we're visual people. So the more input that we can have, the better it is. That way, at least we can say, okay, well, I see where you're going, and I see your budget, and we can get someplace in the middle. That's always really helpful for on the design side. So kind of going along those same directions, we had another question from the audience. So when you're thinking about control, and without getting manufacturer specific, unless you want to, how do you recommend levels of control, or how much control a space needs, as opposed to needing, a full-size concert venue or something a bit smaller? That can go to either one of you guys.
Yeah, so I'd say it depends on what you're doing in the venue, like what size of your church, and like, are you gonna have 10 moving lights, or are you gonna have 200 moving lights? Are you gonna have a video wall with the media server that you're gonna be also programming? Those are the types of things. I also look at how, in Neil's case with the 10 venues, like what platform can service all of the venues. Like right now we have, we have 3 or 4 campuses, and we have we have the same platform in every room, from the big room all the way down to the kids room. And we're actually about ready to make a change in the main broadcast room, because the product that's in there it's not doing what it needs to do, and we're going to bring in media servers and different things, and so we need to upgrade to a more robust console. But being able to have the same console in every venue is really nice if you're able to do that.
Yeah, I think largely it depends on the space. We try to match solutions based on the size of our spaces. So we have sort of tiered spaces that we support, if you will. So we have, big rooms. We have like 2,000 seat rooms, and then we have some, smaller 800 to 1,200 seat rooms, and then we have some really small spaces and some overflow spaces. And so in our situation, it's hard to find a single backbone of a product that's perfect for all those spaces, but we try to keep solutions consistent at each tier. So our smaller tier spaces all have a similar solution, medium and larger, based on, product cycle and when it's time to switch stuff out and when stuff is end of life. All those things play a factor. I will say one thing we've found, and this is something that people don't always love to hear, but it's rung true for me incredibly so. Here in the last couple of years, I'll share it. Is in our smaller, more frequently used multi-purpose spaces, what we've found is that less is more. And so in those spaces, we put in a much lighter product that's, basically just a touchscreen that sits at front of house that gives them some basic control of color in the room and front light and house light color. And, what we found is what was in there before was, a PC solution or, a smaller console with 36 faders on it. And what we found is that people were getting less out of the spaces with more control options in them because they were afraid of them. And so, what we've done is we've gone through and scaled way back the amount of control in those spaces. And what we're finding now is that from a return on investment standpoint, those rooms are getting more use and they're getting used in more excellent ways than they were previously. So being able, there's definitely a trade-off. There is less control and less ability for creativity in those spaces. There's no way around that. But the amount of value those spaces now create with their lighting systems is probably more than doubled what it was previously with a heavier control solution in there. So I think that's something to consider too, is who's using the space. Do you have a staff guy in there? Do you have a lighting guy? Do you have a production guy? Or is it going to be, your group's director who needs to be able to turn the room on and isn't technologically driven? And being able to provide people like that with a solution where they can still do high-powered ministry, I think is a really valuable consideration.
No, absolutely, and another thing to take in consideration is who is going to be my op for this room? Is it a person who this is all they do is lighting, or is it a volunteer who this is just their weekend thing, then they push go? So when you're thinking about that, do you also, is that a consideration you take into complexity and training? Like do you guys, when you do upgrade a system, this is going to be a two-part question. When you upgrade a system, how much retraining does that entail, and how much time does that take, and is that a consideration in how you choose products? Alex, I'll throw that one to you first.
Yeah. So first off, I'd say that I'm a big fan of getting the right product that solves the problem. Now, there will always be a cheaper solution, and sometimes there's even more expensive solutions. But I think when you're getting a product, I think that needs to be like, what is the problem? Like, what is the thing that you're trying to solve? And make sure that you have the right thing for it. Now, if that means retraining, if that means changing other stuff, I will gladly do that to get us to the right solution. Because whether it's for reliability's sake, or whether it's because it will now give us the options and be able to do the things that we want to do. Like, I'm all about getting the right thing for the right and putting it in the right spot. So yeah, I think all of that stuff definitely includes training. My big philosophy on training is train your key people, that obviously either your staff members or your key volunteers. And then from that point, once they feel good about it, you have them retrain people. And so when you teach someone else how to do something, it really forces you to know what you're doing. And when they'll, the person you're training, they'll ask questions. Well, how do you do this? And they're like, I don't know, let's figure it out. And they're, so they get so much better than me just like, okay, I'm going to train everybody. So 2 people this week, 2 people next week, 2 people. Like, nope, I don't have time for that. And I think it's a disservice to your other volunteers and staff.
So Neil, how about for you? How often how often do you train, and when is training a consideration?
Sure. So this is something that we're working towards. So basically, right now I have a staff team of lighting designers. I have 2 guys, and between the 3 of us, we do the majority of the programming for the organization.
Right.
But we have volunteers that are playing back the programming on the weekends.
Okay.
Part of the reason we've done that that way is it's really easy to put somebody into that spot, and it's really hard to teach someone how to program. We do it. It can be done. But what we've found is, a great way to value a volunteer is to be able to, what we don't want is to say like, hey, yeah, you can come be a part of our lighting team. You've got to sit through 60 hours of training so that, we can get you up to speed on what we do and what our culture is and why we use fixtures certain ways. That's just not a reasonable thing for most people that are volunteering, right? And so what we've done is we've sort of created, we've created this opportunity where you can come in and be a part of what we're doing in a worship experience in a way that's easy and clean. And so that's kind of our heart, is to create spaces for volunteers that can do that. And so what's great about that is the training required to do that is minimal. You have to be able to understand some basic pieces of music and understand transitions, but we can bring somebody up to speed in a, watch one, do one, you teach me kind of scenario, where after 3 weeks, you're at a place where I'm ready to kind of hand you a service and you can play back a cue stack in a way that's meaningful. And then what we do is we look for people that want to go beyond that.
Right.
And inevitably there's always people that are, volunteers that go like, hey, I want to know how it works. And I want to know what I'm doing, and I want to understand more, and I've got the time to invest. And I think creating the time and creating the space to help invest in those people deeper, but focusing our attention on those 3 or 4 people versus trying to make everybody a lighting designer, has been really valuable. The other thing that does for us is it makes the training conversation a little different, because it's a lot easier to manage, in depth for 3 or 4 people.
Right.
Versus, at our weekend playback level, as long as the solution that's in that place supports the idea that a volunteer could be able to come in and run a cue stack, we're more or less good. And so what we found that's cool is I can swap out a lighting console at a campus.
Right.
And not necessarily have to retrain a volunteer. Go, hey, this is different. It's going to feel the same. Here are the pieces and things. And after about a week, they're good, which is really cool.
Cool. I got time for one more question, and then we got to kind of wrap it up. So the one thing we haven't discussed in all of this is maintenance plans. You got all your gear in your rig, and it's there. It's going to be there for a long time. How important is a maintenance plan? Alex, I'm going to start that off with you.
Well, let's just be honest. 95% of churches in America don't do jack until it breaks. Let's just be honest about that. Like nobody's got time for that. But the reality is it does need to happen. It will extend the life of your fixtures. I know that, I know some integrators will have extending maintenance plans that you can sign up for if you want to. Depending on the fixtures and how hard they are to get to and all that stuff might be worth your money. And or if you don't have LD on staff and you don't have guys that know how to, pull fixtures down, blow them out, clean them out, and that kind of thing, then it might be a good option. I know, like for us, usually when we're doing big set builds or when we're doing, when we're tearing the rig apart to do Christmas or do Easter or whatever, that tends to be the time we do maintenance, or we'll bring fixtures down, blow them out, or we'll take the lift in, and if they're not coming down, we'll take the lift up and blow them, clean them off, pull covers and clean them all out. But it is important. I feel like with LEDs, it's I don't want to say less important, but I feel like they're going to keep working longer than with conventional lights. And maybe conventional lights, once a lamp goes out, that's when you used to have to do it, and that's when it got done. So now I think it's like, hey, you need to make a conscious effort to make sure it gets done at least a couple times a year. Sure.
Right. Okay, Neil, how about you? What's your in-house plan? Now you're on the spot. How often are you cleaning your lights for real?
Oh, gosh. So we, I would say we try realistically, and this is hard with a staff of 3 and 10 different buildings. I'll just be real honest. But we partner with the guys at our campuses to help us with some of this. I think in our world we try really, really hard. I would say about every 6 months. We try to blow stuff out. The number one thing we've found is shut the gear off.
I was just gonna say that.
So like, that was probably the number one thing we found that's been most helpful in extending the life of our gear is, my rooms are not doing a show every 6 hours every day of the week. It's
Right.
being used 3 and 4 times a week. And so if your fans are running all night long, they're sucking in dust all night long. So I think, if you have the option to put stuff on relays and shut it off, do that. If you can unplug
Please.
it, do that. If you can flip breakers, do that. And I think, if you have no other maintenance plan, shutting your equipment off will extend its life better than anything else you can do.
Neil, man, I wish I could get that on a t-shirt, because you hit the nail on the head. I know from a manufacturer standpoint, we see gear coming back from permanent installations that shouldn't be broken, and it's 1,000% from, well, we never turn it off. It's like, and this is the thing about touring. Everybody thinks that touring, the fixtures get beat up. They don't. Well, they do, but not like it is in permanent installation, where y'all don't turn off your lights. Please, you turn off the lights in your house at night, right? Please turn off the lights in your rig as well.
Yeah.
Yes. That's such a good thing. It's so crazy how you're like, oh, just turn it on. Like, who buys something for thousands of dollars, turns it on and walks away and leaves it? Like, nobody does that.
Yeah. Okay. Listen, guys, we're about up with our time, so I just want to take a moment to thank Neil and Alex for hanging out with us for this last hour. I really appreciate it. Especially for Alex, I know I know you're on the West Coast, so I know you had to get up a little bit early to help us out today. So thank you very much. Thanks to Todd and our video team for making sure we look good and sound good. And looking forward to seeing you all out there again next month. We'll have some new exciting topics to talk about. Until then, I'm Mike Graham with Tech Talk.
Thanks.